Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. A swan has a filtering system in its mouth so that when it dips into food or water or wherever it is, only that which is appropriate to come through to it for nourishment comes through, and the rest gets held back and spit out. Whales have a filtering system, something like that. If you've ever seen movies of whales coming together to feed, they have a filtering system in their mouth which allows the food to go through but holds everything else back, and then that comes back out. Each of us has to establish within ourselves a filtering system. And to develop this filtering system, we have to develop our wisdom to a certain extent. We have to be able to tell the difference between good and evil. We have to be able to tell the difference between what is halal, permissible, and what is forbidden. And we have to move forward on this path where we continue to make decisions in our life as to what is forbidden and what is permissible. When Allah created man, He placed within man all of creation. Now, to understand the meaning of that, one has to understand that man is capable of many different ways of being. For instance, a lion has a lion's face. A bull has a bull's face. A crocodile looks like a crocodile. You can recognize them. And as you recognize them, if you have some experience with them, you recognize their qualities. Man is different. Man can be any of these animals. Man can be a lion. Man can be a bull. Man can be a crocodile. Man can be a deer. Man can be a gecko. Man can be all of the animals within creation. But you will not be able to recognize that by looking at them, because they have faces that we recognize as men. So men hide behind their faces, and they hide the qualities of the animals that they have within them. Now, it's not so important that we understand the animals in others, which is a pastime of a lot of people. Criticism is a pastime of a lot of people. But what we need to be able to do is understand our own actions and somehow understand when our lower self is at the forefront of our consciousness or our wisdom is at the forefront of our consciousness. And the question is always put in the beginning stages: how do you tell the difference between when the animal qualities are what is controlling you and or when wisdom, the higher qualities, are controlling you, when God's qualities are what is making you work? Well, there's some simple rules. Animals basically are involved with themselves. I mean, when a lion makes a kill and it is eating whatever it has killed, it doesn't make sure that it leaves some for other animals in the forest. It eats as much as it can, maybe brings some to the rest of the lions. They eat as much as they can, and then after they're done, there may be something left over, but it certainly isn't on purpose. It isn't a conscious effort to create food for other species. It's the same way with a crocodile. A crocodile is scouring around looking for food, and it finds whatever it can find. It kills it. Sometimes it buries it because it likes putrid things, and then eats it later. But it isn't running around trying to supply sustenance for other creatures. And it's like that throughout the animal kingdom. Everyone makes space for themselves, and everyone is trying to protect themselves from all the other animals. There is this constant competition for food and for livelihood. The transcendent qualities within us have a different attitude. Allah's qualities, if we have been able to take on some of these qualities, are qualities that are giving as opposed to taking. Mercy is something that you give to others. Compassion is something that you give to others. Love is something that you give to others. Kindness is something that you give to others. Allah gives. If man is to begin to come close to the way that Allah is, what man needs to understand is man has to give. And in giving, he is doing Allah's work. Allah has no limitations on the amount that he can give. He is without limitations. So no matter how much Allah gives, he is never depleted. There is always more. Man feels a sense of depletion. Man feels a sense of not having enough. Man has fear. And in that fear, he believes that if he doesn't reserve for himself, he may not have enough. This leads to miserliness. This leads to hoarding. And these are among the qualities that make man descend into being an animal. In order for us to be rid of these qualities, we have to be rid of the fear that brings these qualities about. So as long as we are afraid that we will not have enough, we will gather things and hold on to things for ourselves. This has to do with the status of our faith. How strong is our faith in God, and how much do we rely on that faith, and how much do we rely on God to give us what we need? And can we believe that whatever circumstances we are in, Allah will provide for us? Allah will give us what's necessary. Allah will supply for us everything that we need. There are many stories that talk about the depth of faith and the fact that no matter what circumstances people are in, they are willing to accept those circumstances with the belief that whatever has been placed before us, Allah has placed before us. Whatever circumstances we find ourselves in, Allah has put us in those circumstances. And Allah will relieve us of those circumstances when the time is appropriate to be relieved of those circumstances. There's a story about a man whose name was Bawa, who was one of these people who trusted in Allah for everything. And he wore very ragged clothes. He barely ate, and he used to wander within the town that he lived in and would live on whatever was given to him. And there were some people who were kind to him and they understood his nature. However, the children in the town didn't quite see him that way. They were mean to him. Sometimes they would beat him. Sometimes they would throw sticks at him. They would make his life difficult. One time, he was beaten by a group of teenagers, and it was an exceptionally vicious beating. So he saw that it was dangerous for him to be in this town, and he decided he had to move on. So he left the town and went to the next town over. And it was a long journey. And because of the beating he had taken, he wasn't in very good shape. And it took him a long time to get there. And finally he got to the walls of the town late at night, and it was cold. And he saw someone sleeping next to the wall. And he thought, well, if I sleep next to him, I'll get some of the heat from his body and will make the night less difficult. The next morning he woke up and there were soldiers around him, and he didn't quite understand what was going on. And then the soldiers pointed to the body, and the body was dead that was next to him, and there was blood coming out of that body. And because he had slept so close to that body, there was blood all over him. The soldiers immediately arrested him and took him before the magistrate, who sentenced him to death. All of this time, he never lost his faith, and his remarks were to himself that Allah, whatever position you have put me in, there's a reason, and I have no fear because you have put me in this position. It was time in 3 days for him to be executed. And they took him out and they took him to the gallows. And the person doing the execution proclaimed what had happened and proclaimed why this man was being hung. And someone ran forward and said, "This is unjust, this is unjust. He didn't do it. I did it. I'm a butcher, someone came into the store. For some reason, we got into a heated argument. I had a knife in my hand, and I ended up slitting his throat and killing him. They immediately released Bahul, and they then took this man for punishment to the judge. Bahul also went, and Bahul, who was constantly in a state of acceptance and constantly in a state of prayer to Allah, continued in that way. As a matter of fact, prior to his being put to the gallows, he stood there and asked if he could pray for a while. And they gave him that right, but he prayed silently, so they didn't know what he said. And later they asked him, what did he say? And he told them that what he said was that whatever Allah has in store for him, he is willing to accept, because Allah knows best. They went and took the butcher before the magistrate, the judge, and the judge then sentenced him to death. And Bahul said, "Can I speak, please?" And he said, "This man didn't mean to kill him. It was an act of passion. We weren't there, so we don't know how he was inflamed. But there are other ways to resolve this. And one of this is to pay an appropriate amount to the family for the murder and let the man go. It's obvious he's repented, and he also came forth and told the truth to save my life from being unjustly accused." The magistrate heard this and agreed with Bahul, and they made arrangements to have him pay the other family for the death of the man that he killed. Meanwhile, the magistrate understood Bahul's nature and understood that here was a man whose faith in God was unceasing and never ending. Here was a man whose faith in God was such that no matter what circumstances came about, he was not afraid and he didn't lose his faith. So he told Bahul that he could live in his garden, and they created a small shed for him to be able to have as a home, and he was taken care of. The point being that not everybody recognizes the nature of people until circumstances bring that about. But we are closest to our own nature, and we have to recognize our motives and our intentions. And it is through recognizing our motives and our intentions that we can begin to alter our path, so that as opposed to acting with animal qualities, we act with human qualities. And this is done through introspection. This is done through looking at ourselves and what we do and how we do it on a regular basis. We can't let go of this introspection. We can't let go of examining ourselves. So we have to establish an examination of our own being within ourselves. This is judging that we're allowed to do. It's not up to us to judge externally and to judge others, but we should judge ourselves. And to be able to judge ourselves appropriately, we have to know the various qualities that we are capable of having. We have to know our anger. We have to know our hastiness. We have to know our vengeance. We have to know our egocentric self. We have to know our delusions. We have to know our torpors. We have to know all of the various ways that we can enter into states that are inappropriate for us. And we have to understand them. And if we can't do that, it is very difficult for us to control who we are. And that what happens is that we become what is traveling through our minds without any filter. In the same way that the swan and the whale filter what they eat, we have to filter the thought process that goes through us. We need to understand that the mind is capable of thinking of almost anything. The question is, do we go along with that process? I had someone I knew about 6 years ago who was having mental problems, and his mind told him to jump from a bridge. And he did. And he lived, but he broke both of his legs and was in the hospital for a very long time. Our mind can be destructive for us. However, the way that our mind is destructive for us is in a way that makes us think that we are somehow gaining an advantage, or we are somehow doing something that is positive on our behalf, something that will somehow bring us to a level of peace, or to a level of satisfaction, or to a level of repose. And the mind has all of its interaction with the elemental world. And in the elemental world, there are many hypnotisms and glitters that the mind is attracted to. And the mind begins to believe that if it obtains these things, somehow we will be put at ease. Somehow we will be more comfortable and our life will be easier. In truth, the kind of peace that we are looking for is not available through acquiring elemental treasures within the world. It doesn't happen that way. And people spend a lifetime trying to acquire these treasures, trying to acquire elemental needs, acquiring wealth, acquiring homes, acquiring cars, acquiring various things that they think will somehow fulfill them and make them content. In reality, the only thing that can make us content is a pathway through truth and a pathway in truth. And we have to find that truth. We have to find our way towards that truth. Now, the question is, how do we find it? How do we learn about it? And we learn about it through someone who knows about it. We learn about it through a teacher who explains to us that which is positive for us and that which is negative for us, that which will fulfill our needs and that which will make us more difficult in our life with ourselves and with other people. Somehow, we have to find our way to the truth, And then we have to find out true satisfaction and where it comes from. What happens when you're with a teacher who is real, there is a transfer of love. There is a transfer of love from Allah to the teacher and from the teacher to the assembled. And that love brings about a certain kind of internal satisfaction and internal peace. Now, when my sheikh was alive, we were in a constant effort to be with him. We would drive many miles just to spend a couple of hours with him. Why? Because that interaction with him was a love interaction, an interaction whereby we felt true comfort. As a matter of fact, we felt protected. We felt when we were with his presence, we were protected from all of the vagaries of this elemental illusory world that could come at us. We felt safe. We felt as if we were somehow cloistered from this world, somehow removed from this world in a way that protected us, in a way that put a bubble around us that wouldn't allow harm to come to us. Now, there came a time when the sheikh passed. There came a time when he was no longer with us in physical form. And this was a difficult transition because for 14 years, which was the amount of time I spent with him, we were used to being within the presence of that loving kind manifestation. And one of the important understandings about a true sheikh is that what he has, he is capable of giving to you. He is capable of giving out. So the kindness that he had resonated into us, and we were able to feel that kindness. That love that he had for us resonated within us, and we were able to love him with that same resonance. We began to understand that this state was a state that we could be in. And we understood that this state was different than the normal state of reacting to our mind and reacting to the vagaries of what our mind tried to lead us to do. We began to understand that there were states available to us that were different than our thought process. So many people are caught in their thought process to the point where their thought process becomes their reality and they don't believe there's any way out of it. The truth is, there is a way out of it. And our thought process is not who we are. And the interaction with the mentor, the sheikh, the guide, who instills in us heartfelt qualities that come from Allah, changes us as beings and takes us to places that we might not have been able to go without him. So you can imagine when he was in a coma and passing, fear overcame a lot of people. And that fear led to a lot of tears. And people didn't know what to do. and a period of chaos entered into the lives of many people. But if we believe that he was his body, that fear, that chaos would continue. But if we understood that he wasn't his body, that there was more to him than his body, that the vibration of reality was manifest in him, and that when the manifest part went away, the vibration of reality still existed, we could tune into that vibration without the body. And we began to understand that, and we began to be able to bring about that loving and that kindness and that inherent resonance that comes from Allah into our being by focusing on the reality of what we had seen. And the reality of what we had seen was proof that God exists, was proof that God's qualities exist. And whether we can see those qualities or not, they still exist. God is without form. As a mercy to us, he sent prophets and ketubs and friends with form so that we could make the jump from form to formlessness. And this is something that each of us has to do individually. We have to make that jump to formlessness. We have to understand that the formless God is constantly with us, constantly surrounding us, constantly invested in our lives and guiding us in the appropriate way. We can't lose that faith. And that faith is what makes us strong. And that faith is what makes us be able to not be afraid of our life in this reality, not be afraid of not having enough, not be afraid of constantly needing things. We lose our fear when we are overwhelmed by love. We lose our desire when we are overwhelmed by love. We lose our needs when we are overwhelmed by love. When one of my sons was about 3 years old, my wife went to Bawa and complained that he doesn't eat. And Bawa looked at her and he said, "There's so much love in him, and he's getting so much love from all of you and me that he doesn't need to eat. So don't worry about it. When he needs to eat, he will eat." Bawa ate very little because he was so full of Allah that his needs were different than ours. His need to eat was incredibly reduced, and he could be maintained on very little food. What we learn is that there is food outside of this elemental world that is more important to us than all of the food within this world. For some people, fame is food. For some people, wealth is food. For some people, actual eating of food is food. There's so many, for some people, power is food. There's so many different ways that people feed in this world. But for true man, the true food are Allah's qualities. And love is the food for true man. Mercy, compassion, kindness are the food for true man. And when these qualities enter into our being, they drive away the animal qualities that are the lowest part of ourselves, and we live in the highest part of ourselves. And this is what is called transcendence, living in the highest part of ourselves. We are capable of being as lowly as a worm or greater than angels. And we have to understand the nature of how far up we can go and how low we can go. When we are low, we are in our animal qualities. When we are high, we are in Allah's qualities. And we have to make an effort to maintain and sustain ourselves in Allah's qualities. And the question that comes to us is, how do we do it on a regular basis? And one of the reasons for the 5 times prayer is to constantly take a break from the mind that never ceases to spend time with your Creator. So the way that we can relieve ourselves of our control from these animal qualities is to turn from them to our Creator, to turn to our Creator to take us to the transcendent qualities. And to do this, we have to be conscious of the fact that we can go low or we can go high, that we have animal qualities and we have transcendent qualities, and we have to know the difference. We have to know the difference between greed and mercy. We have to know the difference between right and wrong. If we don't know these differences, if we don't make a study of these differences, we're lost. We're hypnotized into the world, and we're hypnotized into the way of the world. The world is not going to help us out of our dilemma of being attached to the world, because the world wants to keep you attached to it. And most of the world does not have transcendent consciousness. Most of the world does not look to elevate themselves out of the animal world, to bring wisdom into their lives. We have to make the choice that we are going to be different, and that what the world tells us is a lie, and we aren't going to accept this lie. And we have to stay strong in that path. We have to have the certitude, the determination, and the faith to stay there. And Allah will prove to us that we are on the right path. Allah will show us through that love and through that kindness where reality is. As you give, so shall ye receive. So as you love, love will be returned to you. As you are kind, kindness will be returned to you. As you are merciful, mercy will be returned to you. As you are compassionate, compassion will be returned to you. And these treasures are Allah's treasures. And what is greater than Allah giving of Himself to you? What treasure in the world can reach the level of Allah giving of Himself to you? So when you give of yourself to others, Allah will give of Himself to you. And that is your salvation. That is what's going to save us in this world. And we have to pray that we understand that, and that we are allowed to enter into that relationship with man and with God, where what God gives comes through us and we can give it onto others. That our hands are open and our hands give out God's qualities. We need to walk love around. We need to walk mercy around. We need to walk compassion around. And in that action, Allah will give us more and more and more. We have limits. He has no limits. As much mercy as we have within us, if we are inclined to give it away, Allah will give us more. If we hold it and think that we can hoard it somehow, a limit happens to what we're allowed to get. So understand that you get through giving, you don't get through taking. And we have to become the ones in the world who give. And giving is not necessarily money or wealth. Giving has to do with interactions with others to bring love into their hearts, to bring love into their being, to bring kindness into their being. And as we learn to give those kinds of qualities, we will grow ourselves in those kinds of qualities. We have to ask Allah to continue to give to us so that we can give out. And we have to also make an effort to give. And it begins in the home. The people closest to you, love them, be kind to them. And then think about it. How many people do you interact with in your entire life on a close basis? 100, 200? Love them. Be kind to them. And if they're not kind back to you, let it be. There's no need to rectify situations. We can't make people love. Only God can make people love. What we can do is we can show love, and we can show what love has done to us. So may we be the ones who don't need but give, who don't ask but give, who take love and bring love into this world. The world certainly needs more of it. May it be so for each of us, that we enter into this relationship with God that He gives to us, and then we give out to the rest of the world. Ameen, Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.